It is the Martha Zoller Show, and we got all kinds of fun things happening in Georgia. We've got continued information or interest around Fonnie Willis and Nathan Wade. But, of course, we're in the middle of a political season. I wanted to have Brian Robinson join us to talk a little bit about what happened last week, what to expect this week, and then, of course, next week is Super Tuesday. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing great, Martha. Thank you for having me on.
So today, weirdly enough, is another primary day. People aren't paying much attention to it because it's Michigan, but there is another primary today.
Yes, there is. And I think what the nation is looking at is, well, the Democrat side this time than on the Republican side, ironically, because, Michigan has a very large Muslim/Arab population. Of course, Dearborn, Michigan is overwhelmingly Muslim today, and it in recent years has been that population has been a big Democratic vote. These are folks who voted for Joe Biden in 2020, and today, given the distaste many of them have for Joe Biden's policies on the Israeli war, which for many Republicans we support helping Israel. There's a backlash, and so you may see some Muslims taking steps to show a protest vote against Biden in this primary. So that would be the one thing to watch today. Obviously, you're going to expect to see President Trump on the Republican side continue to stomp his way to the nomination.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, last week he won South Carolina, roughly 60-40 is what we saw there. And I do think that Nikki Haley, look, I'm biased. I'm going to vote for her in the primary. I don't mind telling people that. But I do think she has a point that it's not a small number of people that are voting against Donald Trump in Republican primaries. And so there is work that has to be done. And whether she's the one to facilitate it or someone else, there's work that has to be done.
Yeah, I agree with the assessment that people deserve a choice. And she obviously is still attracting large numbers of people. Now, is she getting trounced? Is a 20-point loss in your own home state a slaughter? Yeah, it probably is. But she's still attracting large numbers of raw votes. And a lot of those Nikki Haley voters in these primaries are going to be the decision makers in November between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. A lot of these folks probably don't want to vote for Donald Trump in November. So, she's given those people a voice and reminding them they are Republicans. Because the differences between Haley and Trump aren't just character-driven. They aren't just differences in personality and differences in approach. They differ on policy. Ukraine is just one example of many. NATO would be another, where Nikki Haley represents what the party has been for most of the last half century, and Trump represents this new form of republicanism, the MAGA republicanism, that he has recreated in his own image over 9 years, which is, a remarkable accomplishment, the way that he has totally changed what the party stands for. But she reminds us that there's still a lot of Republicans that, like the old way, it's a minority. The 40% shows it. It's a minority, but that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people who maybe are free traders, people who aren't isolationists, people who are more of the Chamber of Commerce crowd than this populist crowd.
So are we becoming, because, the Democratic Party for a long time has been a group of a lot of different factions that they've had to weave together and get to the polls. And there seemed to be less of that on the Republican side. But are we becoming that kind of party where there are factions that have to be weaved together? And, just looking at the South Carolina numbers, there were roughly 24% that voted for Nikki Haley that said they wouldn't vote for Trump. Of that number, only about 5% said they were Democrats that voted for Nikki Haley. So it wasn't this huge number of Democrats that crossed over and voted for Nikki Haley. I think roughly half of those people are going to be pretty easy to bring back in, that once Trump is the nominee, they're going to, party loyalty is going to kick in. But there's another half, which is, 16, 18% that are going to have to be won back over. And that's a big number.
Yeah.
That's a big number.
It is a big number. And a lot of those folks abandoned Trump in 2020 and then came back to the Republicans here in Georgia to vote for Brian Kemp and Chris Carr and Burt Jones in 2022. So these are people who want to be Republicans, but we got to make them comfortable. We got to make them feel welcome. And do we seem to be on the path that the Democrats have been of stitching together a diverse coalition of competing ideas? I do feel that way, Martha. Look at the Dems, right? They are split over the Israeli war. There's a large number of Jewish Democrats, a large number of Muslim Democrats, and they are at polar opposites. You are seeing that fracture in the party very clearly right now. There is no easy path for Joe Biden to heal that wound. He's got to make somebody mad. I've seen it even with the Dems, even on abortion. Part of why Dems haven't been able to capitalize on the Roe v. Wade issue all that much here is Dems can't really agree what they are for, because there's a faction of their party that wants abortion rights at such an extreme level that those are unpopular too. And so they're unable to have this centrist position that brings in more voters because of that ungluing of the coalition.
The Bill Clinton position, that was a very moderate position that brought in a lot of crossover voters.
Just like legal and rare is what you're talking about there.
Yes.
But I tell you, when I was watching the primary debates this year with Vivek Ramaswamy and DeSantis and then Haley and Asa Hutchinson and others, much more so than in the 2012 debates, I saw policy differences that can't be papered over, policy differences that are at loggerheads. There's no bridging a lot of these. And that's sort of the glue that holds a party together. And so Republicans coming out of 2024, one thing they're going to have to figure out is what they stand for, because there's still this growing divide between what Trump has made it and what it used to be. And the MAGA side is bigger and certainly can win in the primary system fairly easily and certainly could kill everybody in the caucus system. It's still the MAGA folks still need old Republicans to get to 50. And, all I ever hear from many of them is, oh, y'all are rhinos. There's derision toward them. And I want to be like, hey, guys, do you want to win or do you want to be nasty? Because you got to make a choice here, because those people can go somewhere else.
Absolutely. Brian Robinson, if people want to follow you, how can they do it?
Follow me on Twitter at Lord Tinsdale. And also, Martha, you sometimes fill in for me. I am a co-host of Political Breakfast. Get it wherever you get your podcasts. Me and Tharon Johnson, who many of your listeners know from the Georgia Gang, out with 2 shows every week. So thank you so much for giving me the chance to mention that.
Yeah, and absolutely. And you guys end up paired up in a lot of other places too. So look for Tharon Johnson and Brian Robinson, especially Brian Robinson. We love to hear what he has to say. Thanks so much for being with me today.